What's up, guys, and welcome to today's video. I hope we're all good. Today we will be continuing on with this little mini series where I am reviewing some of my older fitness content to see if I still agree with the things which I said. Obviously, over the course of 6 years, quite a lot can change. So maybe my opinions have also changed during that period of time. This video in particular, which we are going to be reviewing, is the 5 shoulder exercises you should be doing. As it stands, it currently has 7.4 million views. So let's go through it and see if I still agree with what I've said. I believe the first exercise I said you all should be doing is the overhead dumbbell press. Now, this is a good exercise, especially if you're doing it right. It's effective, predominantly at focusing on building the front delt, which most people don't really need to be working upon, but we'll talk about that later. Do I still do it? Is it my top 5? No, it's been demoted. The reason behind that is just the sheer amount of times I've injured myself trying to get the dumbbells into position at the start of the set. And because you're kind of starting off in this really awkward position where everything is like excessively stretched out and not in a natural, safe position to be pressing at, I end up spazzing something in my trap or around the shoulder joint, and it's not good, put it that way. So as I have gotten a little bit older now, more conscious about staying injury-free, I actually do my pressing movements in a much safer starting position. So either I would use a machine or I would use a bar in a cage where the bar is resting on the support barriers. Okay, I find that if I just transition into a neutral grip, not only does it feel more comfortable, but I actually get a little bit more range of motion, because as the elbow can go a little bit lower, when you're in this position, the elbow can't go that low. You're kind of restricted. This is the bottom portion of the movement. But as you bring the elbow closer, you can bring it further down. Okay, so you get more of a stretch. So you can go through a greater range of motion, and it's also more comfortable for me. The next exercise, which I've recommended everyone should be doing, is the dumbbell lateral raise. Obviously, the focus of this exercise would be primarily to focus on building up the mid-delt, which is the middle section of your shoulder. Is it in my top 5? No, it's been demoted as well. Reason behind that is just because there's so much of the range which isn't really being challenged. The resistance at the first third or even first half of the movement is minimal, so the length and portion of the delt is not really being worked. So I would suggest replacing that with the machine. And I'm not talking about the machine lateral raise where you're bending the elbows and lifting your arms up and down like a chicken. No, I'm talking about the machine lateral raise where your arms are straight, and it's usually plate loaded, sometimes cable loaded, but my God, it is very, very good at building up your mid delts because you're just having so much resistance applied throughout the entire range of motion. Now, unfortunately, most gyms do not have that machine, but for sure, I've started to notice over the past year or so, more of the gyms which I'm going to have started to introduce it to their gym floor, which is absolutely fantastic. So for sure, this has been added to my top 5 exercises for building shoulders. The next exercise which I recommended is the cable lateral raise. Now, this exercise will still remain in the top 5, and it's also still a very good alternative if you don't have access to the machine lateral raise. There's a couple of ways that you can do this, maybe some ways you shouldn't do it. So let's say, for example, if you're doing a standing cable lateral raise, a bit like when you're doing a cable crossover for the chest, there's a lot more room for cheating whenever you stand upright. Other muscle groups take over just to help you lift that weight up, and then you almost tend to kind of lean back a little bit and point your thumbs up to move the tension away from the mid delt to the front delt, which is relatively stronger, and just make it easier for yourself. So to remove that potential element for cheating, I'd always recommend lying down or maybe sitting down. So the lying down variation, the bench on a slight incline, the attachment's pretty low down. The room for cheating is a lot less. And also you could do the Y raise variation where you're sitting upright on a close cable attachment and just kind of bringing your hands out to the side. Both very good exercises, and I would really recommend taking away the handles and just using cuffs instead. So you put the cuffs around your wrist, and just that little tweak where you no longer have to kind of squeeze a handle. You notice that there's a lot less engagement in the forearm, maybe even the bicep as well, and you just have more tension placed on the mid delt itself. So that stays in there. Congratulations, but just make sure that when you're doing the cable lateral raise, just do it as optimally as you can do. The next exercise, which I've recommended, is the rear delt dumbbell fly. Again, this is a decent exercise. It certainly no longer has a position in my top 5. Similar reasons for the dumbbell lateral raise. It's just not that effective, particularly because there's minimal resistance placed at the starting third of the movement. So the muscle isn't really being trained a huge amount in the lengthened position. So I would change this for a rear delt cable fly. So you can do it seated or standing, ideally seated, in front of a cable crossover station. And I think I would more than likely now do it one arm at a time. It's obviously going to take longer. The fact that you probably are going to have to do higher reps means it's going to take even longer just to do this exercise. But when you do it one arm at a time, it just gives you that focus required to really ensure that your form is on point and you can really isolate the rear delt. And the last one, the reverse pec deck machine, I would still keep this in for sure, because you're getting a great amount of resistance from the very start of the movement throughout the range of motion which you're going through. If you don't have access to this particular machine, you could just do the same thing with cables. It's very similar. Only issue with the cables is you don't have that chest support, but you could try and do it with a bench in front of the cables. So they would be my top 5. Now, I would still agree with the approach of having 2 rear delt focused, 2 mid delt focused, and maybe 1 front delt focused to have that, balanced out, proportioned shoulder. The majority of people, even those that are lifting and have been lifting for a while, if you put them side on and get them to look in the mirror, you'll just notice their front delt is a lot more developed than the rear and mid delt. So they should be doing the majority of their shoulder training focusing upon those areas. So even if it means starting off a shoulder day with some rear delts or mid delts, that's probably going to be a good course of action. So there's my top 5. Most likely is going to continue with being my top 5 long into the future. I hope you have enjoyed this. Make sure you check out the chest video and all the other videos which will be coming out very shortly.